Alexander is remembered as one of the greatest military minds in history, a man who conquered half the known world before he even turned 33. From Greece to Egypt, Persia to India, Alexander the Great's name echoes through the centuries as a symbol of genius and glory. But behind the marble statues and heroic tales lies a truth that's far more disturbing. History often treats Alexander the Great as a flawless figure, an unstoppable force of brilliance who united cultures and spread Greek civilization. But this glorified image is not the full story. The reality is Alexander wasn't building a peaceful empire. He was enforcing submission through fear. In 332 BC, Alexander set his sights on the powerful and wealthy Phoenician city of Tyre. It wasn't just a strategic target. It was a statement. Tyre was a jewel of the Mediterranean, sitting confidently on an island about half a mile from the mainland. With its strong navy, towering walls, and confident defenders, Tyre refused to surrender to Alexander's expanding empire. And that was a mistake they would never live to regret. Alexander, unwilling to bypass Tyre and leave an enemy stronghold behind him, launched one of the most brutal and relentless sieges of the ancient world. But this was no ordinary battle. It lasted for 7 agonizing months. And what followed wasn't just a victory, it was a massacre. Unable to reach the island city by land, Alexander ordered the construction of a massive causeway, essentially a stone bridge across the sea, so he could drag his siege towers to the city gates. He threw thousands of laborers and soldiers into the task, building under constant enemy attack. Tyrians fought back fiercely, using fire ships and even heating sand until it was red hot, then pouring it down onto Macedonian soldiers. The defense was desperate, inventive, and incredibly brave. But Alexander's ambition was relentless. Once he broke through the walls, he unleashed a fury that would stain Tyre in blood. Over 8,000 Tyrians were slaughtered in the streets. Not soldiers, civilians, women, children, and elders found no mercy. Homes were burned and temples desecrated. The message was clear. Resistance to Alexander would not be tolerated, but the horror didn't end with the battle. Alexander ordered 2,000 surviving men to be crucified along the shoreline, their bodies nailed to crosses as a gruesome warning to other cities. Crucifixion wasn't just a method of execution. It was psychological warfare. Each crucified corpse sent a chilling message: this is the price of defiance. The rest of the surviving population, estimated at over 30,000 people, was sold into slavery. Families were ripped apart, children torn from their mothers, and entire generations vanished into the slave markets of the empire. And what was their crime? Defending their home. To Alexander's admirers, the siege of Tyre is often portrayed as a strategic masterpiece. But to anyone looking closely, it was also one of his most cold-blooded atrocities. A deliberate campaign of extermination designed not just to win a city, but to crush a people's will forever. This wasn't just war. This was a brutal message carved in blood, fire, and bone. And it worked. After Tyre, other cities surrendered without a fight, terrified of suffering the same fate. That's the legacy Alexander left behind. Not just as a military genius, but as a man who ruled by terror and never hesitated to bury thousands for the sake of one victory. Power doesn't just corrupt, it isolates. And for Alexander, the deeper he marched into Asia, the more paranoid and ruthless he became. The lines between loyalty and betrayal blurred. And soon even his closest companions, those who had fought beside him since childhood, began to fall one by his own command. The most infamous of these betrayals was the cold-blooded murder of Clytus the Black. Clytus wasn't just a trusted general. He once saved Alexander's life at the Battle of Granicus by cutting down a Persian soldier who was about to kill him. A seasoned warrior, respected by the troops, and loyal to Macedonia, Clytus should have been untouchable. But something had changed in Alexander. By 328 BC, Alexander was deep in Central Asia, adopting Persian customs and expecting his Macedonian officers to treat him like a living god. Many didn't approve, including Clytus. One night during a banquet filled with wine and tension, Clytus openly criticized Alexander for abandoning Macedonian traditions and disrespecting the men who had made him king. Tempers flared, words escalated, and then it happened. In a fit of drunken rage, Alexander grabbed a spear and killed Clytus on the spot. His savior, his friend, his general, stabbed to death in front of the court for daring to speak his mind. Even ancient sources describe Alexander's regret the next morning. But the damage was irreversible. A clear message had been sent. No one was safe, not even heroes, and Clytus was just one name on a growing list. Take Parmenion, another loyal general who had served Alexander's father, Philip II. Parmenion was executed based on suspicion alone. His son had been accused of plotting against Alexander, and without trial or proof, Alexander ordered both father and son killed. No questions, no defense, just swift, calculated elimination. Then there was Callisthenes, the court historian and philosopher. He refused to perform proskinesis, a Persian act of bowing before the king, which many Macedonians saw as a humiliating submission. For that, Alexander had him imprisoned, and some say tortured, before he mysteriously died in custody. These weren't enemies, they were allies, mentors, friends. But as Alexander's empire expanded, so did his paranoia. Anyone who questioned his authority, anyone who reminded him of his humanity, became a threat, and threats had to be removed, publicly and violently. By the end of his campaign, the man who once inspired loyalty was ruling through fear and blood. He didn't just kill enemies, he killed the people who built his empire with him. And through it all, the myth of greatness grew louder as the silence of the murdered became deeper. By 324 BC, Alexander had conquered the vast Persian Empire, but holding it was a different challenge. Now came the real war, not of swords and siege towers, but of identity, culture, and control. And at the heart of his plan was a carefully crafted event that looked like diplomacy, but felt more like domination. It was called the Susa Weddings, a grand political theater orchestrated by Alexander to force a union between the Macedonian elite and the conquered Persian nobility. In one day, over 90 high-ranking Macedonian officers were ordered to marry Persian noble women. They had no say, no courtship, no choice. These were not love stories. They were strategic shackles. Alexander himself married Statira, the daughter of the defeated King Darius III, and Parysatis, daughter of the former Persian king Artaxerxes III. It was a double wedding that symbolized a complete merging of Macedonian and Persian bloodlines, on paper at least. To the outside world, this looked like harmony, but for many involved, it was humiliation. The Macedonian soldiers were furious. They had fought and bled for years across brutal terrain, only to be told they had to marry foreign women for political convenience. Some of them were already married. Others viewed Persian customs with contempt. But Alexander didn't care. His will was law, and the Persian brides, they were used as tools, traded like political tokens to cement Alexander's vision of a blended empire. Their opinions, desires, or autonomy didn't matter. They were dressed in foreign clothes, paraded in front of crowds, and given to men they had never met. The Susa weddings also came with a chilling message. Alexander no longer saw himself as just a Macedonian king. He now believed he was a divine world ruler, blending East and West, shaping new identities through brute force and ceremonial control. Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, but his shadow didn't. His death didn't bring peace. It opened a gaping power vacuum that triggered one of the most chaotic and blood-soaked periods in ancient history.